The Vorn Empire had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Their ships were everywhere. Their soldiers were on every world. Their flag flew over 300 star systems, and no one dared to challenge them. The Vorn were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. They believed they were the greatest species in all of existence. They had conquered dozens of other races and forced them to serve. The Vorn took what they wanted. They enslaved who they wanted, and they killed anyone who stood against them. For 10,000 years, no one had ever successfully rebelled. The conquered species had tried many times. The insect-like Keithrani had risen up twice. The aquatic Delphori had attempted 3 separate rebellions. The rock-skinned Gorvani had fought back for 50 years before finally being crushed. Every rebellion ended the same way. The Vorn were simply too powerful, too organized, and too willing to use extreme violence. The conquered species had learned to accept their place. They worked in the mines. They built the ships. They grew the food. They did whatever the Vorn commanded. Hope had died long ago in most of their hearts. Then the humans arrived. Earth was a small planet on the edge of the galaxy. The Vorn had not even known it existed until one of their scout ships detected strange radio signals coming from that region of space. They sent a fleet to investigate and found a primitive species that had just barely learned to travel between stars. The conquest of Earth took only 3 days. Human weapons could not penetrate Vorn shields. Human ships were slow and clumsy compared to Vorn vessels. The Vorn landed armies in every major city and declared Earth to be property of the Empire. The humans surrendered. They had no choice. Commander Zethak was given control of Earth. He was an experienced Vorn officer who had overseen the integration of many conquered worlds. He expected the humans to be like all the others. He expected them to accept their fate, to bow their heads, and to serve. But something was different about the humans. On the first day after the conquest, Zethak ordered all humans to report to registration centers. They would be assigned work duties based on their skills. Those who were strong would work in construction. Those who were smart would work in technical roles. Those who were neither would be sent to the mines on distant worlds. The humans came to the registration centers. They waited in long lines. They answered questions, but they did not bow their heads. Zethak noticed this immediately. On every other conquered world, the defeated species would not meet the eyes of their Vorn masters. They would look at the ground. They would speak in quiet voices. They would show submission in every way. The humans were different. They looked directly at the Vorn soldiers. They spoke clearly. Some of them even smiled, though there was no happiness in those smiles. There was something else, something Zethak had never seen before in a conquered species. Defiance. Not active resistance. The humans did not fight. They did not refuse orders, but there was something in their eyes that troubled Zethak deeply. It was as if they had not truly surrendered at all. It was as if they were just waiting. The first incident happened 3 weeks after the conquest. A Vorn soldier struck a human worker for moving too slowly. This was normal. Vorn soldiers struck conquered workers all the time. The proper response was to work faster and say nothing. But the human who was struck did something unexpected. She turned around, looked the soldier directly in the eyes and said, "Is that the best you can do?" The soldier was so surprised that he did not react for several seconds. No conquered being had ever spoken to him like that. When he finally raised his weapon to strike again, something strange happened. Every human in the work area stopped what they were doing. They all turned to watch. They did not move toward the soldier. They did not make threatening gestures. They just watched. The soldier suddenly felt very uncomfortable. He lowered his weapon and walked away. He told himself it was because the humans were needed for labor. He told himself it was not fear, but deep inside he was not certain. Word of this incident spread quickly among the humans, and it spread just as quickly among the Vorn. Commander Zethak demanded a report. He studied the incident carefully. He watched the recording from the soldier's helmet camera. He saw the human woman's face. He saw her eyes, and he felt something he had not felt in many years. Unease. Zethak had conquered 17 worlds. He had broken the will of 17 species. He knew how to crush hope. He knew how to turn proud beings into obedient servants. But looking at that human woman's face, he was not sure his usual methods would work. He decided to make an example. The woman's name was Sarah Chen. She was a teacher before the conquest. She had a husband and 2 children. Zethak ordered her arrest and scheduled a public execution. This was standard procedure. Kill one rebel and the others would learn to obey. The execution was scheduled for sunrise. The Vorn set up a platform in the center of what had once been New York City. They forced thousands of humans to attend. Sarah Chen was brought out in chains, her face bruised from the interrogation. Zethak stood before the crowd. "This human defied the Empire," he announced. "This is the fate of all who resist." He expected the crowd to be silent. He expected them to look away in fear. He expected the execution to break their spirits completely. But Sarah Chen did something that changed everything. As she was forced to her knees, she lifted her head and began to sing. It was a simple song, one that humans had sung for hundreds of years. It was called "We Shall Overcome." At first, only her voice could be heard, clear and strong despite everything she had suffered. But then, one by one, other voices joined in. Humans in the crowd began to sing. The sound grew and grew until thousands of voices filled the air. Zethak ordered the soldiers to silence them, but there were too many. The singing continued. Sarah Chen was executed, but her voice did not die with her. The song continued long after she was gone. That night, Commander Zethak sent an urgent message to the Vorn High Council. "There is something wrong with the humans," he wrote. "They do not break like the others. I request additional forces and guidance." The High Council received many such requests from new conquest zones. They did not take it seriously. Humans were a primitive species. They would learn to obey like all the others. They were wrong. Within 1 year, Earth became the most difficult world in the Empire to control. The humans did not rebel openly. They did not attack soldiers or sabotage equipment. They did something far more dangerous. They refused to stop hopping. Every time a human was punished, others would gather to support them. They would sing. They would tell stories. They would look each other in the eyes and say, "We are not alone." The Vorn could not understand it. They could not stop it. But the real danger was not what the humans were doing on Earth. The real danger was what was about to happen on every other conquered world in the galaxy. Because the humans were about to be shipped to the mines, and they were about to carry their defiance with them. The transport ship carried 3,000 humans to the mining world of Kareth VII. Among them was a man named Marcus Williams. He had been a history teacher before the conquest. Now, he was just another slave being sent to work in the darkness underground. The mines of Kareth VII were famous throughout the Empire. They produced the rare minerals needed for Vorn technology. They were also famous for breaking the spirits of any species sent to work there. The conditions were harsh. The work was dangerous. Many workers died within the first year. Marcus looked around at the other passengers on the transport ship. Humans filled most of the cargo hold, but he could see other species as well. There were Keithrani with their insect-like bodies and clicking voices. There were Gorvani with their stone-like skin and slow movements. There were Delphori who needed special water tanks to survive outside their home ocean. All of them had the same look in their eyes, the look of beings who had lost everything, the look of slaves who expected nothing but suffering for the rest of their lives. Marcus began to talk to them. At first, the other species were suspicious. They had learned not to trust anyone. Friendship was dangerous in the mines. Friends could be taken away. Friends could be used against you. It was safer to be alone. But Marcus was persistent. He asked them about their worlds. He asked about their families. He asked about their histories, and slowly they began to respond. A Keithrani named Chitrik told Marcus about her home world, which the Vorn had burned to glass 3,000 years ago. She told him about the rebellion her ancestors had attempted and how it had failed. She told him that hope was poison, that it only brought more pain. Marcus listened carefully. Then he told her about Earth. He told her about all the times humans had faced impossible situations. He told her about slaves who had sung songs of freedom while they worked. He told her about prisoners who had written poetry on the walls of their cells. He told her about people who had marched peacefully against armed soldiers and won. Your ancestors rebelled with weapons, Marcus said, but there are other ways to fight, ways that cannot be stopped by soldiers or ships. Chitrik made a clicking sound that Marcus had learned meant disbelief. What weapons do you speak of? We have nothing. We have our minds, Marcus said. We have our voices. We have each other. The Vorn can take everything else, but they cannot take those things, not unless we let them. The transport ship arrived at Karath VII. The prisoners were unloaded and sent to their work assignments. Marcus was put in Mine Shaft 7, one of the deepest and most dangerous sections. He was assigned to a work crew that included 20 humans, 15 Keithrani, 10 Gorvani, and 5 Delphori. The work was exactly as terrible as he had been warned. They spent 12 hours a day breaking rocks with primitive tools. The air was thick with dust. The tunnels were hot and cramped. Every day someone was injured. Every week someone died. The Vorn overseers were cruel. They carried electric whips and used them freely. They had quotas that had to be met, and they did not care how many workers suffered in the process. Most of the other species had accepted this as their fate. They worked in silence. They did not complain. They did not resist. They simply waited to die. Marcus refused to accept it. On his first day in the mine, he started talking to his coworkers. He asked their names. He asked about their lives. He shared stories about Earth and about human history. At first, the others were confused. Why was this new human so interested in them? What was he trying to accomplish? But Marcus kept talking, and slowly something began to change. The Gorvani were the first to respond. Their species communicated through subtle changes in body temperature, which the Vorn had never bothered to learn. This allowed them to pass messages without the overseers knowing. Marcus asked them to teach him this language, and they were amazed that he wanted to learn. No other species has ever asked, a Gorvani named Thornback told him. They think we are stupid because we move slowly and speak little. Everyone has something to teach, Marcus said, and everyone has something to learn. He started organizing quiet meetings in the darker corners of the mine. At first, only a few workers came, but word spread. More and more began to attend. Marcus told them stories from human history. He told them about movements that had succeeded against all odds. He told them about the power of unity and solidarity. The Vorn are strong, he said, but they are not as strong as they think. They rule through fear. If we stop being afraid, they will not know what to do. A Delphori named Wavelight spoke through her translation device. But what can we do? We cannot fight them. We have no weapons. We do not need weapons, Marcus said. We need each other. If one of us is beaten, we all gather around them. If one of us is punished, we all share the punishment. If they try to break us, we show them that we cannot be broken. They will kill us, Chitrik said. They might, Marcus admitted. But they are already killing us slowly. At least this way, we die standing up. And maybe, just maybe, we light a fire that cannot be put out. The first test came 2 weeks later. A Vorn overseer accused a young Keithrani of hiding minerals. This was a serious crime, punishable by death. The Keithrani was dragged to the center of the mine for public execution. Marcus stepped forward. I did it, he said. The Keithrani is innocent. I was the one hiding minerals. The overseer was confused. Then another voice spoke up. "No, I did it. It was Thornback the Gorvani." Then Wavelight spoke. "It was me." One by one, workers from every species stepped forward and claimed responsibility. The overseer's confusion turned to anger, then to something that looked almost like fear. He did not know who to punish. He did not know what to do. In the end, he let the Keithrani go. He could not execute everyone. That night, something remarkable happened. For the first time in centuries, workers from different species gathered together without fighting or competition. They shared food. They shared stories. They shared something that had been missing from the mines for a very long time. Hope. Word of what happened in Mine Shaft 7 spread to other parts of Kareth VII. It spread to other mining worlds. Somehow, it even spread back to Earth and to the other conquered planets. The Vorn noticed that something was changing. Production quotas were being missed. Workers were becoming less obedient. There were no open rebellions, no violent attacks, but there was something else. A spirit of resistance that they could not crush with whips and executions. Commander Zethak received reports from across the Empire. The humans were spreading. Wherever they went, they brought their strange ideas with them. They talked to the other conquered species. They taught them songs and stories. They showed them that it was possible to maintain dignity even in slavery. Zethak recommended a simple solution: separate the humans from the other species. Keep them isolated so they could not spread their dangerous ideas. The High Council agreed. Orders were sent to every world in the Empire. Humans were to be kept apart from all other conquered species. They were to work in separate facilities, live in separate quarters, and have no contact with anyone else. But it was already too late. The seeds had been planted. The fire had begun to spread. And across the galaxy, conquered beings were starting to remember something they had forgotten long ago. They were starting to remember how to hope. 5 years passed after the conquest of Earth. In that time, the Vorn Empire experienced more instability than it had seen in the previous 1,000 years. Nothing dramatic had happened. There were no great battles or massive uprisings, but something fundamental had shifted throughout the conquered territories. On the agricultural world of Delphorus Prime, the fish-like Delphori had always been considered the most obedient of all conquered species. They had served the Vorn for 6,000 years without a single recorded incident of resistance. They were peaceful by nature and deeply afraid of violence. But now something was different. The Delphori had learned a new concept from the humans. They called it working slowly. Whenever a Vorn overseer was watching, they worked at normal speed. But whenever the overseers looked away, they slowed down. They made small mistakes that had to be corrected. They asked unnecessary questions. They pretended not to understand instructions. Individually, each act was tiny. But together, across an entire planet, food production dropped by 15%. The Vorn could not understand why. They could not point to any specific act of sabotage. Everything looked normal on the surface. But the Empire was slowly being starved. On the factory world of Gorvan III, the stone-skinned Gorvani had discovered something remarkable. Their species could communicate through temperature changes, a method the Vorn had never learned to detect. The humans had taught them that this was called an advantage, and that they should use it. Now the Gorvani passed messages across entire continents without the Vorn knowing. They coordinated work slowdowns. They warned each other when inspectors were coming. They shared information about which overseers were cruel and which were lazy. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Gorvani felt like they had some control over their own lives. On the insect world of Keithra IV, the clicking Keithrani had rebuilt something that the Vorn had destroyed long ago. They had rebuilt their community. For generations, the Vorn had deliberately kept Keithrani workers separated. Families were broken apart. Hives were scattered across different regions. The Keithrani had been isolated, alone, and easy to control. But the humans had taught them something important. You don't need to share blood to be family, a human woman named Alina had told them. You can choose your family. You can create it wherever you are. The Keithrani had started forming new hives, not based on biology but based on choice. Workers who barely knew each other began treating each other as siblings. They shared food. They protected each other. They sang the old songs together, songs that had been forbidden for centuries. The Vorn tried to stop it. They moved workers around, transferred them to different facilities, punished anyone caught participating in these new hives. But it was like trying to stop water from flowing downhill. The community kept reforming, kept growing, kept spreading. At the center of all this change were the humans. There were only about 3 million humans scattered across the Vorn Empire. Compared to the billions of other conquered beings, they were a tiny minority, but their influence was enormous. Every human carried the same basic message. We do not accept this. We will not break, and neither should you. They did not preach violence. They did not organize armed resistance. They taught something far more powerful. They taught the conquered species how to maintain their dignity. They taught them how to find joy even in suffering. They taught them how to support each other and create meaning in their lives. And most importantly, they taught them that resistance did not have to mean fighting. It could mean singing. It could mean storytelling. It could mean working together. It could mean refusing to give up hope. The Vorn High Council finally understood the danger. This was not like any rebellion they had faced before. You could not defeat it with weapons. You could not crush it with executions. It was spreading through ideas, through connections, through the very bonds that held societies together. Commander Zethak was summoned to the capital world to explain what had happened. He stood before the 12 members of the High Council and tried to describe something that the Vorn simply could not understand. The humans are different from any species we have conquered, he said. They have a quality that we have not encountered before. They call it resilience. No matter what we do to them, they do not truly break. They find ways to maintain their spirit, and they are teaching this ability to the other species. High Counselor Vorthak leaned forward. His 4 arms were crossed in the Vorn gesture of displeasure. You are telling us that this primitive species is threatening our empire with songs and stories. Yes, Zethek said simply. I know it sounds absurd, but I have seen it with my own eyes. We can kill their bodies, but we cannot kill their ideas, and their ideas are spreading faster than we can contain them. Then we will kill more of them, Vorthak said. If one example does not work, we will make 1,000 examples, 1,000,000 examples. We will execute every human in the empire if necessary. Zethak shook his head. I considered that option, but I believe it would make things worse. Every human we execute becomes a symbol for the others. They have a concept called martyrdom. When we kill one of them, we do not destroy their cause, we strengthen it. The council members looked at each other. This was something completely outside their experience. For 10,000 years, the Vorn had ruled through simple fear. Threaten enough violence and any species would submit. It had always worked before. What do you recommend? Vorthak asked. I do not know, Zethak admitted. I have no solution. I only know that our usual methods are making things worse. Perhaps we should try something different. Perhaps we should try treating the conquered species better, giving them more freedom, reducing the violence. Vorthak stood up, his gray skin flushed purple with anger. You suggest we show weakness. We are the Vorn. We do not negotiate with slaves. We do not treat inferiors as equals. This is our way. This has always been our way. I understand, Zethak said, but I fear that our way may be leading us toward disaster. The High Council dismissed Zethak and debated for many hours. In the end, they chose the traditional Vorn response. They ordered a massive increase in security forces. They authorized the execution of any human who showed signs of spreading dangerous ideas. They banned all contact between humans and other species. and they launched Operation Clean Sweep. 100 Vorn warships were sent to Earth. Their mission was to reduce the human population by 90%. If humans were the source of the problem, then eliminating most of them would solve it. The ships arrived in Earth's orbit on a bright spring morning. Commander Zethak was given the honor of giving the order to begin the bombardment. He looked at the blue planet below him. He thought about the human woman who had sung while waiting to die. He thought about the strange light in human eyes that refused to go out no matter what he did. He gave the order. The first weapons struck North America. Cities were vaporized in seconds. Millions of humans died instantly. The bombardment continued for 3 hours, moving systematically across every continent. When it was over, Earth's population had been reduced from 8 billion to 800 million. The survivors were scattered, traumatized, and completely at the mercy of the Vorn. The High Council was satisfied. The problem had been solved. But they were wrong. News of what happened to Earth spread across the Empire. It spread through whispered conversations in mines. It spread through temperature-coded messages among the Gorvani. It spread through the clicking songs of the Keithrani hives. It spread through the water channels of the Delphori settlements. And something changed. The conquered species had learned to hope from the humans. Now they learned something else. They learned to be angry. For the first time in thousands of years, that anger was not directed at each other or at themselves. It was directed at the Vorn. And across 300 star systems, billions of conquered beings began to wonder the same thing. What if we all stood up at the same time? What would happen then? The Vorn did not know it yet, but they had just lit the fuse on the largest explosion in galactic history. 10 years after the conquest of Earth, a Vorn cargo ship landed on the mining world of Karath VII. Among its cargo was a single human prisoner. Her name was Lisa Chen. She was the daughter of Sarah Chen, the woman who had sung at her own execution. Lisa was 15 years old when her mother was killed. She was 35 now. The 20 years between had forged her into something hard and sharp and dangerous. Not dangerous in the way the Vorn understood danger. She had no weapons. She had no army. She had no fleet. But she had an idea that was about to bring an empire to its knees. Lisa was sent to mine Shaft 7, the same place where Marcus Williams had planted the first seeds of resistance 2 decades earlier. Marcus was gone now, dead from a lung disease that killed many miners. But his work had continued. His message had spread. When Lisa arrived, she found something that would have been unimaginable before the humans came. She found unity. The workers in Mine Shaft 7 were not separated by species anymore. Keithrani worked alongside Gorvani. Delphori shared meals with humans. They had created their own society underground, hidden from the Vorn overseers. They had created a family. Lisa was welcomed into this family. She shared her story with them, and they shared theirs with her. She learned about everything that had happened in the 20 years since humans first arrived in the mines. She learned about the slow growth of resistance across the empire. And she learned about the Great Silence. The Great Silence had begun 3 years earlier. Workers in mines and factories across the empire had simply stopped talking when Vorn were present. They communicated through other means, methods the Vorn could not detect, but to their masters, it seemed like they had all gone mute at once. The Vorn could not understand it. They could not stop it, and it terrified them more than any armed rebellion ever had. The silence is speaking louder than any words could, a Gorvani elder named Stoneheart told Lisa. The masters hear nothing, but we hear everything. We are talking to each other across the galaxy, and they have no idea. Lisa nodded. It's a good start, but it's not enough. The Vorn are getting desperate. They're increasing the violence. More workers are dying every day. We need to do something more. What do you suggest? Asked a Keithrani leader named Brightclick. Lisa had been thinking about this for 20 years. Ever since she watched her mother die, she had been preparing for this moment. She had studied every rebellion that had ever failed. She had analyzed every mistake, and she had developed a plan. "We need to stop the Empire from functioning," she said. "Not with weapons, with coordination. Every ship needs workers to run it. Every factory needs workers to produce. Every mine needs workers to dig. What happens if all the workers stop at the same time?" "They will kill us," Wavelight's daughter, named Deepcurrent, said. "They killed billions of humans for far less." "They might kill some of us," Lisa admitted. "But they cannot kill all of us. There are too many of us. And if they kill too many, they will have no one left to work. Their economy will collapse. Their ships will not fly. Their weapons will not function. The Empire will fall apart." The gathered workers looked at each other. This was not a new idea. Others had suggested it before, but it had always seemed impossible. How could they coordinate such an action across 300 star systems? How could they communicate without the Vorn intercepting their messages? But things had changed in the past 20 years. The networks that had grown in the silence, the connections that had formed between species, the methods of communication that the Vorn could not detect, all of these had created something that had never existed before. They had created a galactic community of the oppressed. "It is possible," Stoneheart said slowly. "The thermal networks can reach almost every world with Gorvani workers. That includes most of the industrial planets. The hive songs can reach the agricultural sectors," Brightclick added. "And the Delphori water channels can spread the message to the ocean worlds." "What about the human communities?" Lisa asked. "The Vorn think they have separated us," a human man named David replied. "But we have found ways to connect. Smugglers carry messages for us. Some of the cargo ship crews have been bought or convinced to help. We can reach almost every human settlement within 3 months." Lisa felt something rising in her chest. It was hope, the same hope her mother had sung about before she died. "Then we can do this. We can coordinate a galactic work stoppage. We can bring the Vorn Empire to its knees without firing a single shot." The plan was simple. On a designated day, every worker in the Empire would stop working. Not forever, just for one day. Then they would see what happened. If the Vorn responded with mass violence, they would stop again, and again, and again, each time for longer, each time with more workers. The Vorn would have 2 choices: negotiate with the workers or watch their empire collapse. Spreading the message took 18 months. 18 months of whispered conversations, clicked songs, temperature codes, and smuggled letters. 18 months of building trust between species that had been taught to hate each other. 18 months of convincing billions of beings that they had nothing to lose. Lisa traveled to 20 different worlds during this time, always disguised, always one step ahead of the Vorn security forces. She spoke to Keithrani queens and Gorvani elders and Delphori councils. She told them the same thing she had told the workers in Mine Shaft 7. "We are stronger than they think. We are stronger together than apart. And the only thing we have to fear is our own fear." The date was set for the 20th anniversary of Sarah Chen's execution. Lisa thought her mother would have liked that. On that day, across 300 star systems, 4 billion workers stopped working. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Ships lost power as their crews walked away from their stations. Factories went silent. Mines stopped producing. Food processing plants shut down. The entire economic foundation of the Vorn Empire ground to a halt. The Vorn High Council convened an emergency session. They ordered immediate military response. They commanded their soldiers to force the workers back to their stations at gunpoint. But something unexpected happened. When Vorn soldiers arrived at the work sites, they found the workers sitting peacefully, not fighting, not running, just sitting. Millions of beings from dozens of species all sitting together in silence. The soldiers did not know what to do. They had been trained to fight enemies who fought back. They had been trained to chase enemies who ran. They had not been trained for this. Some soldiers opened fire. Workers died, but the others did not move. They did not fight back. They just kept sitting and dying and sitting. The images spread across the empire. They spread to the Vorn civilian population, who had been told that the conquered species were happy and grateful for Vorn rule. The images showed something very different. And for the first time in 10,000 years, some Vorn began to ask questions. Why were they doing this? Was the empire worth all this death? Was there another way? The work stoppage lasted 3 days. During those 3 days, the Vorn economy lost more value than it had in the previous century of wars and disasters combined. On the 4th day, the High Council did something that had never been done in 10,000 years of Vorn history. They negotiated. The negotiations took place on a neutral station in the Outer Rim. Lisa Chen represented the workers. She faced 12 members of the Vorn High Council, the most powerful beings in the galaxy. She was not afraid. "You have proven your point," High Counselor Vorthak said. His purple skin showed signs of stress that had become common among Vorn leaders in recent days. "We are willing to offer certain concessions, better working conditions, reduced quotas, limited local autonomy." "That is not enough," Lisa said. "What more do you want?" Lisa looked around the table at the beings who had conquered her world, killed her mother, and enslaved billions of sentient creatures. She thought about everything that had been lost. She thought about everything that had been won. "We want freedom," she said. "Complete freedom for all conquered species, the right to govern ourselves, the right to live on our own worlds, the right to exist without fear." Vorthak laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "You ask for the impossible. The Vorn Empire has existed for 10,000 years. We will not dismantle it because some slaves refuse to work." "Then we will refuse to work again," Lisa said. "And again, and again. Every time you refuse to negotiate, the stoppage will be longer. Every time you respond with violence, more of your own people will question your rule. You cannot kill all of us, and you cannot run your empire without us." The negotiations continued for 3 weeks. The Vorn tried every tactic they knew. They tried threats. They tried bribery. They tried manipulation. Nothing worked. Lisa and her fellow representatives simply waited. They knew time was on their side. Every day that the talks continued, the Vorn economy weakened. Every day, more workers joined the movement. Every day, more Vorn citizens questioned whether their empire was worth saving. In the end, the High Council agreed to a compromise. Full independence would be granted gradually over a period of 50 years. During this time, former conquered species would gain increasing autonomy. Violence against workers would be prohibited. Mixed councils would govern each world, with Vorn and local representatives sharing power. It was not everything the workers wanted, but it was a beginning. Lisa signed the agreement on behalf of the workers. As she did, she thought about her mother. She thought about Marcus Williams and all the others who had died for this moment. She thought about the power of an idea that could not be killed. The ceremony was broadcast across the empire. Billions of beings watched as a human woman, a member of the most recently conquered species, signed a treaty that fundamentally changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The image became famous. It was called The Signing, and it came to represent the beginning of a new era. But the story was not over. Over the next 50 years, the gradual transition to independence became something faster and more complete than anyone had anticipated. The Vorn Empire, once so mighty and permanent-seeming, began to crumble from within. It turned out that fear had been the only thing holding the empire together. Once that fear was broken, once the conquered species realized their own power, there was nothing left to maintain Vorn dominance. Vorn colonies declared independence. Vorn citizens emigrated to mixed worlds where they could live as equals rather than masters. The rigid hierarchy of Vorn society, which had seemed eternal, dissolved in a generation. 50 years after the negotiations, there was no Vorn Empire. In its place was a loose federation of independent worlds. Humans, Keithrani, Gorvani, Delphori, Vorn, and dozens of other species lived together as partners. The Federation was not perfect. There were conflicts, misunderstandings, old wounds that took time to heal. But there was also something that had not existed for 10,000 years. There was hope. Lisa Chen lived to see her 100th birthday. She spent her final years on Earth, which had slowly recovered from the bombardment. Forests grew where cities had been destroyed. New communities had risen from the ashes. On her last day, she sat in a garden that had been built on the spot where her mother had been executed. A statue of Sarah Chen stood there now, showing her at the moment she began to sing. People of all species came from across the galaxy to see it. Lisa's great-granddaughter, a young woman named Maya, sat beside her. Maya was half human and half Keithrani, one of the first generation of mixed-species children. She had her grandmother's eyes. "Was it worth it?" Maya asked. "All the suffering, all the death, was it worth it to get here?" Lisa thought about the question for a long time. She thought about her mother's execution. She thought about the bombardment of Earth. She thought about the countless workers who had died in the mines and factories and farms. "I don't know if I can answer that," she finally said. "I know we had no choice but to resist. I know that giving up would have been worse. I know that because of what we did, billions of beings now live free who would have died in slavery." She looked at her great-granddaughter, at her mixed heritage that would have been impossible in the old empire. "But mostly," Lisa continued, "I know that your great-great-grandmother was right. We did overcome. Maybe not in the way we expected, maybe not as quickly as we hoped, but we did it, and that means something." Maya took her grandmother's hand. "What does it mean?" Lisa smiled. "It means that no empire lasts forever. It means that ideas are stronger than weapons. It means that when people stand together, there is nothing they cannot achieve." She closed her eyes. "And it means that the songs we sing in our darkest hours might just be the most powerful things in the universe." Lisa Chen died that night, peacefully, surrounded by family. Her body was cremated and her ashes were scattered in the garden next to her mother's statue. A simple plaque was added to the monument. It contained 4 words that humans had been saying to each other for hundreds of years, words that had helped them survive slavery and oppression and conquest. The words were, "We shall overcome." Across the galaxy, in mines and factories and farms, in cities and villages and stations, beings of every species heard about Lisa Chen's death. Many of them had never met her, but they knew her story. They knew what she had done. That night, without any coordination, without any planning, millions of voices across 300 star systems began to sing. They sang different songs in different languages, but they all meant the same thing. They sang of hope, they sang of freedom, they sang of the impossible made possible. And somewhere, somehow, Sarah Chen was singing with them.